Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. Voidfall has taken over my table in these past few weeks, and I've played enough games now where I'm comfortable with ranking all of the different houses available in the game, so hopefully you can hit the ground running by playing an amazing faction during your first couple experiences, or if you just want to join in on the conversation and we can share about our favorites and least favorites. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It's the best way to help us grow, and for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's talk about and rank all of the houses in Voidfall. Before we get into the list, let's do a quick overview of Voidfall. This is a 4X Euro game where you're going to be trying to dominate the galaxy. There's 3 different ways to play: competitive, cooperatively, and solo. It's a scenario-based game, so you'll set up your play area, and each player will assume a faction. Now, these factions have their own action cards, technology, abilities, and they interact with each of those game modes in different ways. In that competitive mode, you are going to be trying to take out the opponents, but in the solo and cooperative, you'll have this threat board that represents the Voidborn, this fleet of zombie aliens that's trying to take over the galaxy. So you're trying to reach a certain victory point threshold while also keeping them at bay. This is my favorite way to play the game. I've played about 18 times at this point, 14 solo and cooperatively, and I think this is the way to play as it mixes the resource management puzzle of the original competitive mode with this unpredictable threat that you have to manage and balance throughout the experience. Sitting at a 9 out of 10 for me, that is Voidfall. Now let's get into the parameters of the actual ranking. When ranking all of these houses in this list, we're looking at the fun factor. It's not a power scale, not which faction is the best, but which faction gives you the most choice as well as enjoyment throughout its entire experience. Now that being said, I'm not going to be showing off any of the house-specific home worlds because there are a couple of factions that replace these houses, but they're not a big enough change to where I warrant they need their own specific spot in this video. Here's a couple of examples here. Usually they add a couple installations or guilds, but it's not going to be a big factor, so I won't bring it up again. And the last thing before we get into the ranking, I want to shout out our channel partner. This is Into the AM Studios. They have several lines of t-shirts and apparel, and by buying from them, you are going to be directly supporting our channel here at SideGame LLC by using our coupon code SideGame Strong. This gets you 10% off your purchase, as well as gives direct kickback to the channel. So if you don't want to be buying board games to support SideGame LLC, you can do it through Into the AM Studios and get one of these awesome shirts. Like the way they feel, wouldn't be wearing them if I didn't. So make sure to use coupon code SideGame Strong for 10% off your order and we'll receive that direct kickback. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the list and rank all of the houses in Voidfall. Starting on the bottom of the list, not the F tier, but the T tier, this is our tutorial tier, and this is number 14, Belitan, 13, Dunlork, 12, Valnis, and 11, Cortozar. Now this is its own category because these 4 factions are basically the same thing. All the houses are identical except for a single technology that they have at the start of their game. Even their scoring and their tracks are all the same, and these are more of for learning the game system. So I don't see myself ever returning to these myself because you can always pick their technologies when you start up, but my favorite thing about these factions in particular is they allow you to focus on the other parts of the game. Try to figure out the different systems, what the cooperative and solo mode feels like, as well as just getting those rules down and figuring out the iconography. This is a beast of a game to teach, so having a tutorial faction like this is awesome, but I am never going to return to these because their abilities are essentially easily replicated from using any of the other factions out there. Before moving on to the next tier, I do want to give 2 quick shoutouts to some of these bottom factions, and that has to do with their technology. Starting off with Valnis and their escape pods, they have an effect that says whenever you would lose fleet power, you can instead return one of them to your home during each of your combats. I think this is a cool way to push you to make more risky maneuvers and allows you to actually lose some of your characters and then have some versatility with how to spend them for your future actions. Another technology I appreciate is from Cortozar. This is number 11 technically, and that's the star bases. This gives you a new type of installation you can build that not only serves multi-purpose being defensive and production focused, but also gives you a way to manipulate population by building out star bases on already pure sectors. So I love that it's another installation type that you can bring out, and Cortozar starts with some on the board already. So that's all of my T tier tutorial. That is Belitan, Dunlork, Valnis, and Cortozar. Moving on to the D tier, these are the factions that I felt didn't perform like I wanted them to. They had a promise of some way that they were going to interact with the game, and it fell flat. And there's only one on this tier, and that's my number 10. This is House Novaris. Now, at base value, their ability says that whenever you gain corruption, you get to produce one of your different resources. This is kind of amazing because a lot of the time that resource production is tied to specific cards, so this encourages you to get more of this corruption. Unfortunately, what this turns up being is a lot of the cards that you have that produce corruption just aren't as good as some of the other things. They replace the resource cost with more corruption. So you end up getting a bunch of corruption, which is going to stop you from actually being able to score. You get swarmed by these terrible skirmishes during the solo and co-op mode. And then when you're fighting the other areas, you have just blocked off a lot of your potential scoring options. So while it does seem great to get this initial advantage, you still have to do the legwork to actually build up this resource production, but it can be useful in the later rounds if you need a quick special production of some type and maybe one of your cards has already been allocated, but for me it's just not enough here. That being said, my favorite part about this faction is actually completely unrelated to this mechanism of gaining the corruption in order to produce, so I think that's also kind of weird that their technologies don't necessarily fall in line with that, but that's their combat replicators tech. This one says that when you're an invader, if you win a combat, not only do you get an extra bounty token, so some additional resources, but you also retain all of the different installations in that sector. This is awesome because in the competitive mode, if you fight somebody with starbases, you get to keep that starbase, which is kind of awesome. You also are able to keep any of the tools, the wrenches, as well as the defense system, so it encourages you to potentially lose a couple of characters because you're essentially turning those into free installations, which based on the scoring that you pick, you can do more things with. So that is the bottom. Unfortunately, the D tier, that is Novaris, not my favorite, and I was hoping for more from them. Moving on to the C tier, these are a couple factions that I think are just okay. They have a small niche that they may fill, but they're never going to be the first factions that I go to or am excited to play. Starting off with number 9, we have House Astoran, and they have an ability where at the end of every round during phase C, you get 2 free fleet power activation, which means you can use them for more cost. It's just something that happens, but you also have to pay 2 additional upkeep. Now this really only happens twice during the game because it'll happen during the last C phase, but you can't really do anything with that fleet power, so that's a little unfortunate, but it is something you don't have to think about, and it just happens. That being said, the one thing that I do appreciate from House Astoran is that some of their cards actually involve you paying the cost of installations, so it's a different way to actually utilize these installations, and I think that's a neat thing that some other factions don't have. So that's my number 9, that is House Astoran. Next up is number 8, this is House Marqualos. Now House Marqualos has a fixation on using agendas and gaining new agendas and spending them for activation costs, and also interacting with trade tokens. So one of their technologies allows you to get extra bonuses when you spend trade tokens, which is particularly powerful when it gets later in the game and you can even activate fleet power with it. But one of them I think makes this faction stand out, and that's autonomous drones. So when you're the invader, you can spend the trade token to get extra absorption, which can be super useful as the invader as it helps with approach as well as salvo damage. And then during the end of the round, during the skirmish, you can spend the trade token to automatically win it. This is amazing during solo and co-op games, but I don't think the utility is very high in the multiplayer competitive games. But having that specific technology allowing you to ignore that whole aspect of the game during the end of the round, it's an incredibly strong ability. And that being said, I don't really enjoy interacting with the trade token mechanic myself because a lot of the times I'm giving up my action now to try to do something cooler in the future, and the actions that Marqualos has are just generic and not particularly exciting that I want to be wasting my time getting these trade tokens to do other actions later. Another strange thing that they have is they start the game with an extra agenda card here, and the agenda isn't particularly great. So this is going to give you extra ways to score for your bounty tokens as well as your fleet power out on the board, and you are going to be gaining more of these as you play, so you're customizing your scoring, but what I've found is you don't really want to be getting rid of these agenda cards as often as you like because you sort of want to focus on doing something so you're able to score as much points from it as possible throughout the course of the game, and then collecting agendas that focus around that. If you're spending time mixing and matching these and spending the costs, it doesn't work as well as just picking one lane and sticking to it from the get-go, because that's going to get you a lot more points in the long run. This is one that I am a bit more interested to play. That's why it is just a little bit higher than Astoran, but once again, not my favorite faction here. That's my number 8, that is House Marqualos. Moving on to the B tier, this is where we get to some characters that have abilities that you stop and think, ooh, that's pretty dang cool. This is something unique and different. Number number 7, we have House Nervo, and this character has a built-in ability where they can use their pink material resource as any of the other resources as often as they like, just not during Phase C. So during the upkeep, they still gotta pay it. But this allows you to invest in a single type of guild and just spam it continuously. They also have some technologies that allow you to double actions, so you're able to do just more every turn, and seeing as you can use pink to pay for everything, this means that you can pretty much reliably take the cost of the actions on. So I love that about this. My favorite thing about them, though, are their cards. They have cards on their production that allow you to do multiple types of the different upgrade trees, so you can pick from multiple on the same card as opposed to bouncing back, but it just allows you to explore more of those tech trees. And then their special uplift card that replaces their conquest allows you to pay pink for additional absorption. So it's a little bit like we saw with House Marqualos with spending the trade tokens, but it's built into the combat card here, so it's not something additional that you have to purchase instead of another cooler technology. So I like this class a lot. That is House Nervo, my number 7. Whereas number 7, House Nervo, had you specializing on one specific type of resource. Number 6, House Thegwyn, has you wanting to diversify and getting as many guilds as possible, getting that production up. They've got a built-in ability that allows you to deploy fleet power on your green guilds as if it were wrenches, but then they also have a great way of just spamming big resources. Looking at their technology, they'll reward you if you're able to produce for credits, and then they also give you extra ability bonuses if you're developing or using your prosperity focus by allowing you to up additional population, making those resource production turns even greater. And then the cherry on top is their focus is production, so you can even use this effect twice, but on their production cards, one of their actions is free and produces everything but credits. This is one of those times where in this game, I try not to produce resources, try to make as much as I can, and then take one big resource production turn. But in House Thegwyn's case, having one card that has one slot that produces almost everything is such a rush when you make it work. And as the entire faction is facilitating increasing that production, this is a card that you're going to try to play every single round, maximize its effect, and then on top of that, it has some choice on the top when it comes to removing corruption as well as moving up your different tracks. I love that this is also the focus as you're going to be playing it more. That's my number 6. This is House Thegwyn. Our final B-tier house, this is House Zenor, and moving back to the sort of playstyle as House Nervo with producing a single type of resource, Zenor wants you to focus specifically on science resource. Whenever you take the science production action and you overproduce, you gain the difference in credit resources. That's a wild resource that you can spend on everything else. So I love that it's a different take on this focusing on one specific resource because it's whatever you overproduce. So you have an entire field of technology and it's going to put out different priorities on maybe different areas that have some of those blue resource production already built in. In addition, they have access to the Destroyer class, which I think is so much fun. I love playing with the different types of ships and units when it comes to technology, and this is one of the coolest as it's extremely aggressive and just gets better as you upgrade it and get into those advanced technologies, which of course you can because you are focusing on that science production. And lastly, let's take a look at their cards. On their politics cards, they get fleet power combined with attacking, which is great, and then in their standard conquest, they get another option for blue production while also gaining another technology. So it is a minor technology, but that just means you're getting more powers and abilities. This is a faction that is satisfying and exciting and allows you some flexibility when it comes to the technologies you're grabbing based on your play session. So that is my number 5, that is House Zenor. Moving on to the A tier, these are some of my favorite factions. They have a gimmick and they do it well, and they explore the different parts of Voidfall and get you thinking about how to use the system in different ways. Starting off with number 4, we have House Kradmor, and this is all about purging all of this corruption from the board as well as your own personal player board. It also allows you to engage in some of the more risky behaviors, taking on additional corruption because you know you can deal with it. It's almost the inverse of House Novaris with the way that it plays, with even their starting technology giving you a way to remove additional corruption. But they also have another option if you'd like, where it encourages you to go and take out Voidborn sectors, which of course you want to do because if you're able to remove corruption, you get a resource bonus. It's going to be different based on whether you take it from your board or from the different map tiles, but nonetheless, you're going to want to be pursuing those corrupted areas and then purging the Voidborn from it. Now, one of my favorite parts about House Kradmor is the fact that they get the coolest temptation card in their kit, starting off with a center action that allows you to go up on your weakest track on your different tracks that you're going up on, but you also get to look at the future areas, and this is without the cost of taking a corruption. A lot of the other factions require you to take one, so this is one that I actually find myself playing playing and utilizing and getting future sight as to what to plan for in future rounds. And then you have an awesome bundling of additional population paired with a focus action, and then the production also has several different productions paired with different track bumps. I feel like I'm always moving up on tracks, but I have choice every time that I do so. House Kradmor takes this concept of purging corruption and does it beautifully and allows me to play some of the actions that I normally wouldn't have. So that's my number 4, that is House Kradmor. Next up is number 3, this is House Fenrax. Toying with population as a resource, at the end of every single round, you're going to get additional resource production based on the areas that you have control over and their population rate. If they're low, you'll get additional credits. If they're high, you're going to get additional science. And one of the coolest things about this is their starting technology, Central Surveillance. Whenever you play your politics card, as an additional cost, you can pay population in order to get extra agenda cards. So you get your scoring stat and then get bonus upgrades on your combat tokens. So it's going to encourage you to fight even more and pick up all of these different locations on the way. One of the coolest things about this faction is it encourages you to go to an area and go to as many areas as possible, because just having population wherever is going to give you some type of bonus. And then their dispersal card even allows you to manipulate your existing population, allowing you to move it from one place to another, giving you opportunities to build strongholds of guilds. So you have some areas where you're just using it for that passive end of round bonus, and others where you've actually built it up with the different guilds and the populations are maxed. This is a great option for solo and cooperative as well, because one of the hardest things to do there is build these, I think they're called sanctuaries, where you need 6 population and 3 gears on these different areas to pass one of the endgame conditions. So this allows you to move around the population that already exists in a new, interesting way. So I love this concept. And then, of course, another cherry on top here, they have a carrier option if you want to get into a different class, which just lets you summon more characters during fights. So I like this concept of having multiple types of ships, and I think that Fenrax does both of these things well. So that's my number 3, that is House Fenrax. And my number 2, the last tier A house, is House Shiveus. And this is such a strange one because it shouldn't be this high, but when you play it, you feel amazing. So Shiveus's built-in ability is during the skirmish phase, the enemy gets an extra attack on you. Not great, but every time you are able to prevent it, you get an extra 2 points. This is honestly negligible. It's way more of a detriment than it is a boon, which is pretty frustrating. But that doesn't matter, because the power of House Shiveus and the way it feels when you pilot them is based on their technology as well as their cards, their action cards. So starting off, they get access to the Dreadnought technology. And if you have the Dreadnought technology, no one else will ever have access to the advanced Dreadnought technology. Only you will. And these ships are ridiculous. They have absorption on their salvo and their approach, and they are 1 unit armies. The single Dreadnought can pretty much take out an entire Voidborn sector. So just having that amount of power at the start and being able to summon multiple is such a cool feeling. And then lastly, I've never picked it, but they have decontamination chambers. You can store corruption on there. Sure. I've never used it. Maybe you have. Tell me in the comments. But I'm always picking Dreadnoughts. It feels amazing. Now, that being said, their cards also feed into this hyper-militaristic approach. 2 of their cards in specific, their Crusade, which replaces Temptation, and then their Politics card, have a bit of a restriction on top of them, though, and that is they must attack corrupted sectors. And this is an interesting choice, because when you're playing in competitive, you have to race to go and gobble up the corrupted sectors before your opponents do in order to make the most out of these cards. But in the cooperative and solo, this is your giant crusade as you're heading to complete that win condition of purging the galaxy of all of the different Voidborn out there. In addition, if you use Crusade, you get extra points based on how many of the enemies you defeated, and if you get one of the higher areas, maybe you've been stockpiling it with different cubes, you can get upwards of like 12 to 13 points in addition to taking out whatever you were targeting. And this is also paired with their summoning. This card is nuts. You get to summon, you also get to attack immediately, and you get points for doing so. These cards are crazy, and they make you feel like the most dominant, powerful force in the galaxy. So that's my number 2. That is House Shiveus. Thinking about it now, this probably could be in the S tier. We're going to change it on the fly. This is also an S tier pick. And that brings us to the top of the S tier, my number one, the best house in Voidfall. This is House Yarvek. If you want the entire galaxy at your fingertips, this is the faction for you. Their special ability is anytime not in Phase C, you can spend a bounty token for a credit or a science. So you can trade all of these things you're collecting throughout the game for additional resources. Or you can trade your reclaim tokens for getting those little yellow flags for additional actions as you would a trade token. So this is crazy. You get to take way more actions than every other player at the table, and then your cards are amazing. So you not only have access to the core great cards, but you have some specific cards for you as well. So let's take a look at what House Yarvek has that makes them a little bit special on that side. Now, starting off on their raid, this replaces innovation. They have an additional combat on their innovation card. This is excellent. Very similar to House Shiveus, where they had more options to attack. So does Yarvek, but whenever you attack with Yarvek, you're generally going to be targeting areas with additional bounty or reclaim tokens on it, which gives you more actions in the future, more choice, more customization, allows you to be adaptive, but also target specific sections. You can also engage with trade tokens if you need to maybe take care of your extra resources at the end of the round, but not really. You're going to be just fine getting extra technologies, extra specials, powers. This is so powerful. And then their conquest also gives you flexibility and choice at the cost of those reclaim tokens, allowing you to move additional corruption or gain fleet power, being adaptive once again to the situation. I love that they have all of these options present. They're able to engage with the additional scoring and to be as flexible as possible to make it all work. It's up to you, though, to puzzle it out to make sure that it does. And that's the kicker here, that you have all of the tools at your disposal, but it's up to you how you plan your different routes, where you're attacking, and how you're allocating these oh so powerful resources. And then to top it off, they have access to the best technology in the game. This is Hyperdrive. Maybe not as good as Dreadnoughts, because I do think that card is just so fun to play, having these powerhouse units, but who knows, maybe Dreadnoughts is out there, you can pair with Hyperdrive. But Hyperdrive is wild. What it does is whenever you attack, you get to first move 5 things. So it doesn't matter where your units are, you can always move them to wherever you want, which means you're not spending your time on moving your characters. You just get to go and attack anywhere. You are a threat no matter where you're at. And that's not action specific. That's any time you invade. That's insane. And then to top it off, during a conquest focus, you can spend your free production. You just get yellow resources, which you're going to use to attack. This is nuts. So you are not only given all the resources you can, but you can move wherever you want. You can attack anything you want. Whatever you win from attacking is going to be used to fuel all of your other stuff. And then you just get free resources for doing the thing that you like doing. It's dynamic, exciting, and allows you to use so many different technologies to customize an experience. Incredible faction. That's my number one. That is House Yarvek. And that's the list. Those are all of the houses currently in Voidfall, ranked from least fun to most fun. What did you think of my choices? Which houses are your favorite? Which house do you want to try next? And what do you think of the game in general? And remember, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It's the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm so excited to hear about all of the things you have to say about Voidfall. I hope you're loving the game as much as I am. SideGame Strong, y'all.